So what is going to happen in the US midterms? Some would say it's too early to tell. There's still a lot of time left till November. You never know what may happen. But some trends are clear to see. There is one trend which is crystal clear, and that is that the House seems to be tilting towards the Republicans. Inflation is running high. There is a real pressure about the cost of living. And Biden's stimulus program is coming under flack from the Republicans, and voters might, despite the passing of the latest bill, just vote for a Republican House of Representatives. And this has been the case historically. Generally, presidents tend to lose midterm elections, and in particular, when you have inflation, that is more likely. When it comes to the Senate, the Democrats may do better than expected. The takeover of the Republican Party by Trumpsters, as many of my Republican friends, moderate Republican friends say, has cost the winning in primaries of a lot of poor candidates. And these weak candidates may just not cross the finishing line. So when it comes to the Senate, the Democrats may unexpectedly do a lot better than expected. So the midterms are going to be a bit mixed. Now, what is important is that the midterms reveal, if we take a step back, if we get out of who wins, who loses, will represent something very interesting about US politics. And that is very simply that the system is, if not broken, it's close to breaking point. And why do I say that? Well, at the moment, the Democrats are not happy with either their president or their vice president. Biden still does well because he's seen as an avuncular figure, Uncle Joe, benign, even though prone to a verbal gaffe or two. But Vice President Kamala Harris is hated. She can't even seem to run her own office. People resign, people leave. All the portfolios she's handed seem to blow up. And no one wants her as the candidate, the next presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. Apparently, there's infighting going on within the inner circle, and Kamala Harris is out of the loop. There is a big divide in the Democratic Party. The left is particularly exercised about woke issues. They care more about unisex bathrooms than about China. Some would argue that, some argue that. There's been a lot of brouhaha about transgender athletes being allowed to compete with women. The case of Leah Thomas blew up, the Penn swimmer who did rather well. And this issue is causing a lot of discomfort amongst traditional Democrat voters. A number of minorities actually are not so keen on transgender athletes competing with women athletes. The Chinese are not, the Indians are not, the Koreans are not, the Hispanics or the Latinos, whatever you want to call them, they are not. And in a way, a lot of them say that the Democratic Party has been taken over by Ivy League ideologues. And these Ivy League ideologues have no dirt under their fingernails. They are the McKinsey sort, like Pete Buttigieg, who's become a particular target for a lot of people who see him as white, elite, privileged, and enjoying paternity leave when others are going through a big crisis. So the Democrats or the Democratic Party has a problem. It is increasingly moving away from the concerns of middle-class people, from working-class people, and it is not just economic issues. There's also cultural issues. Some would argue that they have overreached. The Republicans have their own issues. In Virginia, of course, a relatively moderate candidate won, and apparently he was a much better alternative to his Democratic rival. His Democratic rival was basically all about himself and all about raising money non-stop, and such self-aggrandizement, even in American electoral politics, came to hurt him, and he lost. But Donald Trump is very much alive in American politics. His supporters believe he could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and still be all right, and they would still vote for him. And the control of Trumpsters, or the influence of Trumpsters, or the domination in some primaries of these Trumpsters, means that the Democratic Party is not reaching out to a lot of constituents. Sorry, the Republican Party is not being able to reach out to a lot of constituents as it could if it were run by someone like, or led by someone like George Bush Senior. And the party is going through its own internal civil war of populism versus economic responsibility. The party also has acquired, in many circles, an anti-immigrant hue. It has also lost its reputation for economic sound management, although the Democrats have not done a terribly good job on their end. And of course, the Republican Party lacks coherence. So you have both parties in America in a state of civil war. And between the two parties, there is increasingly a bitter divide. Now, I live in Washington, and I live in Georgetown, and I know plenty of Republicans and plenty of Democrats. And the interesting thing is, when I socialize with young Republicans, there's almost never a Democrat there. And when I socialize with Democrats, there's almost never a Republican there. Writers, authors for Fair Observer, such as Larry Beck, write that if you're black and if you're Hispanic and if you are voting for the Republicans, you're voting against your self-interest, and you've lost the plot. And they generally believe that the other side is fundamentally evil. And the same holds true for the Republicans. They think that the Democrats are going to bring an absolutism, their wokist cult. They are going to impose it and ram it down everyone's throats, whether you like it or not. And they will assail the fundamental role of the family. And I'm not even touching upon the divisive issue of abortion, which has got everyone's knickers in a twist. And so America today, of course, has challenges. But on the whole, if you look at it from a macro level, it's fine economically. Unlike Europe, it doesn't have an energy crisis. America has plenty of natural gas, plenty of oil. It doesn't have a problem with dwindling groundwater. Yes, California has a water problem and a forest fire problem, but in considering that they have the 5 lakes and considering the mighty rivers they have, America is fine. It has got fertile land, it's got water, it's got food, it's got energy, it's got a big internal market. It is not as vulnerable to external shocks. And so economically, everything should be more or less fine. America also has the most dynamic companies in the world. It is the land of Amazon, of Google, of Facebook, of Netflix, of every single big tech company you can think of. It is also the land of all modern aviation and defense technology. All the big players are all American. So with its 800 bases and its state-of-the-art weapons, America has no fear. Yes, there's China, but America's army is battle-tested and it could take China on. It has sorted out global logistics and whatnot. So on the whole, if you take a step back, America is fine. Unlike India, it doesn't have a nuclear-armed Pakistan and a nuclear-armed China sitting at its border. America has Canada and Mexico, where life's good. What's the problem? And yet, in a way, what America has right now is not an external problem. It is an internal problem. The divisions are so deep and they are so wide that they are tearing apart the American social and political fabric. Yes, of course, there's income and wealth inequality, tremendous at a near record, if not a record level, and that hurts. But the problems are even greater than economic. They've now become cultural, and that is the big challenge that will rear its head yet again in the midterms, because regardless of what happens after the midterms, it'll be really difficult for those who get to the Congress. And remember, elections are a 2-year circus, so everyone has to be on the hamster wheel of raising money, particularly if you are a congressman in the House of Representatives. Senators get 6 years, so they get some breathing space. But despite all of that distractions, once they get in, the getting together, the ability to agree to disagree and to get together and to hammer out a deal, that will be in question, because what is happening to America, I mean, it's happening to very many democracies in the world, is the worm at the heart of the apple, is disintegration into identity politics and interest groups. And after the midterms, that crisis will continue.